guess we did need all these chairs.
We're live?
Where are you going to be? Oh, maybe I can use that. Thank you for doing all these copies. Oh my God. Good. Hello.
Sounds a little bit like the microphone. If you pull the microphone closer and Miriam turns the volume down a little bit, it might be less likely to feedback.
Let's see what it sounds like first. I mean, it's really picking up like echoing.
Yeah, that's the kind of, it's on the edge of feedback.
Oh,
See
I
that?
hear it.
Yeah.
Do you want to, maybe Linda can go up and tell her. Linda, first welcome everyone. We're adjusting to sitting in a circle. My name is Zopa and I'm really glad you're here. Could you go up and tell Miriam it's having feedback quite a bit? Oh, she heard. She popped out.
Go ahead, just bring it closer.
Okay,
You'll pick up.
there we go. Now it's, well, how's it in the back? Good. Good? Okay, we'll just go with it.
If there's nobody else sitting down here, maybe we should just all be in the circle. Does that make sense?
Up to you.
Well, like I can't see. Linda, it looks like there's two chairs. You want to sit in a chair and then we'll just be a complete circle?
Oh, you're,
She's not. I don't know. Well, I'll make that.
oh, you're talking about Linda. There's a chair and there's a chair. Yeah. Thanks, Cynthia. That's a nice idea. Well, good morning, and thank you. Thank you. You're brave. These three classes are going to require some courage, and you already made the first hurdle. You got yourself here. And why do I say that? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? But I'll say a few things. Anytime we're going to look at issues of race, gender, class, well, let me just stop and say, how many had some feelings about this before you came this morning? You've had some feelings, right, in the past, or some feelings about even engaging in this. And that's important for us to acknowledge and therefore to treat one another with kindness and realize that we will gently but courageously look directly at our experiences with these isms. Does everybody understand when I say ism, what I'm talking about? I felt like I made the word up, but I didn't want to keep going through racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, classism, heterosexism, it's all of them. And in a way, we're going to look at this through two prisms. One is the Buddhist teachings, and that will help us hold a very big container for being brave, for looking deeply, for being honest, and mostly with ourselves is where we have to start being honest, and then honest with others. So that big container of the Buddhist teachings around suffering and the end of suffering, how it rises in our minds. It's not my brother-in-law. It's not your neighbor. It's not the government. It's rising in our minds. Now, of course, on a relative level, policies and people's actions can be harmful, but how we react is our business. That is our garden. That is our business. And then what we do as we touch in on the Buddhist teachings of loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, patience, This is a long road. When we touch in on those, then we act more effectively. So that's one container, the Buddhist teachings. The second container we'll be looking, well, that's a container. The prism we're going to look at all of this through is race, because it's quite difficult to, that's difficult enough, but if I don't even have time, and we don't even in 3 classes to define every single other ism. But the truth is we live them. We live them out. And so we're pretty familiar. And the third thing I want to say about it is through the prism of any ism, that's not supposed to be a poem, through the prism of any ism, you can begin to understand deeply all the isms, because there's a certain way, we'll look later, at how they function in a very familiar process. Not the content, but the process is quite familiar. So then once you dive in and dig into one, you learn it, and then you can see that process unfolding. For example, if we look at race issues and the process of it very closely, it will be an easy thing to take that template and apply it to sexism, classism, anti-Semitism, heterosexism, all the others. It gives us a way in so that it doesn't just seem so overwhelmingly complex, okay? All right. Okay, you know what let's do? Let's go around the circle and take your time. Don't do this fast. Everybody just goes, Zopa, Bill, Linda, you know. Take your time, say your full name, and where you grew up. And what I mean, you don't need to say, well, I was born here, but 2 months later we moved there. Where, for you, the biggest kind of growing up happened, say before you were 15, okay? So, and you can name the city, state, and country. So, my legal name is Kathleen Merle Heron. I haven't said that for a long time. And I go by Zopa, my Tibetan name. I grew up in north central Montana in a very small town called Havre, Montana, USA, about 10,000 people. And most of the time we lived on a farm outside of that town. Let's go this way. Oh, we need or do we? We don't need to record this part, I don't think. Or shall we?
It becomes rather boring for anybody watching streaming.
That's true.
To
Let's go.
just watch your lips move.
Yeah, I just want to point out that if you choose to speak into the microphone, your story will be streamed and recorded.
That's important. So if you want to pass and you just want to say first name or something, that's okay too.
Yeah. My name's Bill Spangle, and the similar portion of my life I spent on the San Francisco Peninsula, just over the hill from Stanford University, in what we called the poverty pocket of Portola Valley, but that just meant that we didn't have 5 acres for horses. The time when I grew up was also when hippies were invented, and I helped invent them. Did my best on that.
What was invented?
Hippies.
Oh, hippies.
So.
Okay, we're going to keep these stories short. I didn't know as a hippie I got invented. I thought I did it myself. Okay.
I'm Linda Grove. I grew up in a small farm town in northwest Iowa. And my father was a poor minister.
Thank you.
My name's Lynn McClanahan, and I grew up in a suburb of Chicago, Illinois.
My name's Andrea Vargo, and I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia. My mother was Catholic, and there were 9 kids originally in our family.
Thank you.
I'm Melissa Stevens. This is my sister Andrea, and I grew up in Salem, Virginia, in a big family, and it was quite an experience, and there was quite a lot of racism in that small town in Virginia.
Thank you.
This is an amazing coincidence. I grew up in Suffolk, Virginia, in a middle-class family. At the time of my most salient memories are the sit-ins of the 50s.
Wow. Thank you.
Jess Amo. I grew up in very, very tiny rural farming town in Orange County, New York. Lots of racism.
I'm Mary Woods. I grew up in Mount Vernon, Washington, which is about 60 miles north of Seattle. It's a rural town. My father was a pharmacist, big Protestant family. We were, my siblings and I were kind of unaware of all of it. Growing up where we did, we thought everybody lived like this, which we found out as we moved out that wasn't the case.
Thank you.
My name is Celeste Myers, and I was born and grew up until I was 15 years old in Mississippi, in the country, deep country. And I was so blessed and fortunate to have my great-great-grandmother and my great-grandmother as my role model.
Thank you.
My name's Peter Frothingham, and I grew up outside Boston in a suburb of Boston, and my father worked and commuted to Boston most of the part of my early life that I remember.
My name is Bob Wilson, and I grew up in Portland, Oregon. I was born on Christmas Day, 1950, and loved how people just really celebrate Portland by moving here.
My name is Miriam Hammer. I grew up in Lawrence Township, New Jersey, with 3 brothers, and our town was kind of mixed race. As you got closer to Princeton, New Jersey, everything got whiter and richer. Got closer to Trenton, things got darker and unfortunately poorer.
Thank you.
My name is Camilo Marquez. I grew up in the big city, New York, in an area of New York that is called Hamilton Heights. Some know it as Sugar Hill. It's an area where successful black people lived. My father was a physician, and we lived in a brownstone. He was a very ambitious, very successful person, made a lot of money. That's all I'll say about him for now.
Thank you.
Then we moved to Westchester, northern Westchester, and from the time of my age of 10, I lived in Poundridge, New York, on 8 acres.
Thank you.
Silvia Larco was born in Argentina, grew up for 10 years in Mendoza, went to Catholic school then. My parents were very practical. Wherever you were, the school was closer to the house, that's where you went. Then the second school I went was Jewish. The third one was an English school. The fourth one was the public system of the high school in Buenos Aires.
That was your diversity workshop.
My name is Kathleen Stevenson Kuhn. I was raised and felt like I grew up in Syracuse, New York. My father was getting his PhD there, and it was the first time my family had come into contact with people of the Jewish faith and African Americans.
Thank you.
My name is Ruth Hayes. I grew up in Portland in an area that was unincorporated, and it was more rural way back then. And in my senior year, I discovered that Jewish was not just a religion, that was sort of like a race, and there was prejudice against it, which I had no idea. And my father was an alcoholic, which is another ism, so we grew up pretty poor with that.
Thank you.
My name is Stephanie Kaza, and I grew up in Beaverton, when there was only 8,000 people there.
Oh.
And it was a little white bubble. But my mother gained a law degree, and so I watched her really fighting across the draft period for people's rights. And the Unitarian Church was a source of awakening in the middle of that whiteness.
Thank you.
My name is Rosemary Sweet, and I grew up on Long Island in New York, a little suburb called Franklin Square, and in an Italian neighborhood, an Italian family. And we were working class, and Dad was a firefighter, and Mom was a waitress.
Thank you.
I'm Dora DeCourcy. I grew up in a small town in Kansas, where my dad was a college professor. And it seemed that we had 2 black families in our town, but I had no one in my class who was African American.
Thank you.
My name's Melissa Hicks, and I grew up in rural Alberta, Canada, so a very, very small town.
My name is Laura Berg, and I grew up moving very, very often all around California.
My name is Bill Schneider. I grew up in a small town outside of New York City, Long Island, Glen Cove, Long Island. My parents were German immigrants, and my dad, he came over on the boat without anything at the time, and became an entrepreneur and had a lot of success in that path. So that was an interesting experience for me, watching that. Yeah.
Thank you.
My name is Cynthia Irvine, and I grew up mostly in Hilo, Hawaii. Yeah, so the issue of race is a very intriguing one to me, because I can see that it's so different depending on what context you're in.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, you want to keep care of that. Okay, now we see, no matter what things appear to us, like someone might walk in and say, it's all white people or mostly white people, and I don't know what that guy is, or, these are the thoughts that go through our mind. We have huge diversity sitting right here. This is so important because our mind doesn't go that way. It just goes white people or black people, and we need to dig deep down and take the time to share. So now let's just sit quietly with what we've heard. It's good if you're in a chair to put both feet on the ground. That can ground you back as just straight but not tense. Relax the body. We'll do this for about 5 minutes. Relax the mind. Relax the emotions. We're not even trying to meditate. Just be with whatever rises. Greet it with kindness and gentleness. Each thought, if you do not cling to it, will naturally pass because everything's impermanent. Sensations will pass. So just be with the goodness, the impermanence of the natural mind. If you need an anchor, which most of us do, you can use your breath without manipulating it. Just follow its natural course. So now just a piece about being comfortable while you're here. If you need to stand up behind your chair or something, do that. Don't sit through a lot of pain, okay? It will distract you. Secondly, there's two restrooms right through that door. And if you need to go there, just quietly get up and go there. We will take a break in about an hour for just 10 minutes to get some tea, maybe in 45 minutes, okay? All right. Now I need help. I need help all the time. Can you pass those around? We're going to do a refuge prayer. And then, what else did I need? I don't see them here. Okay. And we'll pass this one around. Go that way, this way. Oh, I better keep one for myself. Is there extra, Linda? Yes. I didn't keep one. Okay, thank you. All right. So you should have two sheets. One's called Refuge Prayer and one's called Buddhist Quotes. We'll be referring to the Buddhist quotes throughout the. What's that?
Miriam.
Refuge prayer. Here. Oh. Leave one for me. Okay. There you go. And I want to say, if you are on streaming, I hope this is okay. I think I checked it out with Linda. Okay, it's not picking up enough. Okay, there we go. Okay. The Buddhist quotes, are they going around? Okay, everybody should have two. If you're streaming, number one, please sign up for the class so that you can help financially support our center by giving what you can. And secondly, for the handouts, you can email Linda Grove or myself. I put my email out, I think, yesterday, and we'll get them to you, okay? And I need quotes. Thank you. Okay, so let's do this refuge prayer together. And I'll only say, I think, one thing about it. Generally in our lives, because of our confusion, our great confusion of what we are and what suffering is, what happiness is, very confused. We take refuge in things that lead to more suffering. So we do these prayers to reorient ourselves towards that which can lead us out of suffering and into really endless joy, endless peace. And that's called the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So the Buddha who awakened and the awakenedness in ourselves, which we already have, we're just trying to shine in. And the Dharma, which is all the practices, the path, and the Sangha, those on the path, and in particular, those who have already achieved full awakening. So let's do that refuge prayer together 3 times. I go for refuge to the three jewels through my practice of generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. May I liberate all sentient beings. I go for refuge to the three jewels through my practice of generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. May I liberate all sentient beings. I go for refuge to the three jewels through my practice of generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. May I liberate all sentient beings. Those 6 qualities, starting with generosity, are known as the 6 perfections. They are a key part of the Bodhisattva path, Bodhisattva, fully awakened being. And the other key word in there is all. All. That means all. I say it because who forgets that every day? All means all who agree with me during the day, right? So that's why we say these over and over. We're working on it, but we don't have it yet. So save your prayer sheet, bring it back. Oh gosh, that's going to be the tricky part. Bring it back next time, next class, all right? Now, what does my thing tell me what I'm supposed to do next? Okay, I'm going to tell a story. It has to do with the roots of my stepping forth to do this, which this week I kept asking myself, what? But 30 years ago, I was a young activist lawyer to the left side, and a violent white racist group out of California named WAR, White Aryan Resistance, set out to organize in Portland. Sorry. It's quite emotional for me. I was already doing quite a bit of work around racism through my law practice with the Black United Front in particular. And so this group out of California decided to target Portland for organizing young white, mostly males, but and they chose Portland according to their own literature because of the demographics. It was much more white then, by the way. We've become more diverse. Portland's still incredibly white, but and they chose it secondly because of the history of racism here. And many people don't understand the history of Portland's racism. In a 1-hour documentary, you can get it, and that documentary is called Local Color. We're not going to watch it, but please take that down. It's available through OPB. They're the ones that produced it. And through Local Color, they talked with the African American elders in the Northeast community and gathered that history, and it's pretty amazing. And I won't go into it, but it includes the influx of African American people during the war years to do shipbuilding, and the segregation that occurred during that, after that, etc. I will tell you one law in Oregon, okay? I used to teach racism in the law at the law school. And one of the laws in Oregon became a non-slave state. You probably know the history that after the Civil War, states had to vote, and there were huge violent confrontations about being slave state, non-slave state, etc. I'm sorry, not after. Well, anyway, there was that. I'm not going to go into all the history, but states each had to choose. Oregon has a kind of a reputation because Oregon voted to be a non-slave state. And so partly that was because it was out west and less influenced, smaller population. But Oregon put a law on the books at that time we are a non-slave state. But if you are African heritage, and then there were some others listed, one of them seemed to be not Asian, but anyway, for sure African American. The law they put on the books was that if you were found in the state, you were subject to 54 lashes. So, non-slave state, right? But fully racist. And people don't know that, and they also don't know that up till the mid-50s, it was illegal to intermarry, actually in the whole country, but Oregon enforced that by arresting people. So, and that's just two of the laws. But this documentary, Local Color, is really worth listening to, and you can get it through OPB. So back to the main story. White Aryan resistance started organizing. Flyers were put all over town or in areas. You come out and your car might have a flyer on it, and they were pretty horrendous. I mean, they were violent against black people, calling for exclusion and punishment, and if you want to join this effort, you know. Now, we didn't have the internet, so they were putting flyers around. We were trying to figure out what to do, groups of us to be active against that. And then a young man from Africa, from Ethiopia, was murdered in southeast Portland, very close to where I lived. He was beaten on the street in the night by 3 or 4 of these WAR young white men who went to prison for it later because the Southern Poverty Law Center stepped in and brought a lawsuit against the head of WAR, White Aryan Resistance, and bankrupted him. And then a couple of these guys went to prison. So some friends and I formed a group, and we got funding from the county to do educationals around racism in Portland in particular, because we understood from the reaction people were having that they were like, how could this happen in Portland? Good, liberal, white Portland. And it was like, oh, sweetie, you don't know. You do not know. So we set up a group, and we worked through the neighborhood associations. And we trained hundreds of people in becoming what we called allies to people of color. And it required us white people to look deeply at our own conditioning. And this is why I'm bringing this story forward for many reasons. But because of that, I have had the joys and sorrows of looking deeply at my conditioning, and I'm bringing the models that we created together. I worked very closely for 20 years with an African-American man, Cliff Jones, and Latina, Guadalupe Guajardo. And for 20 years, we worked together in a group called Tools for Diversity, and did that from '88 up to 2008. When I went away to a monastery to rest, and didn't rest there, but anyway, it was a good thing on my part to get more spiritual grounding. So what else do I want you to know about that? I want you to know that as I got really close to an African-American gay man who is out about being gay, I saw what his life was like, and we traveled outside the Portland area enough for me to see that whenever we got outside the Portland area, it was terrifying for him. I'll just give one little example. We did a workshop out near Malala, and And after it went fine, it was with teachers or something. And afterwards, we were going to stop and get some lunch. So, you know, we just do what people do. You pull up. And this was probably 98 by then. And we're going to go into a restaurant, and there's a huge Confederate flag in the window. So we did not go in that restaurant. But it's kind of things that, you know, just happen every day for him, the kind of fear that he lived in every day. As a really brilliant, kind, young person. And it was like, wow, I would have never known this if I had not gotten close to Cliff and went places with him and met his family. And one of the biggest wounds we have is the segregation. We have segregation. It's full on, folks. It's no longer legal, but it's economic based now. The law has outlawed segregation, right? In 1954 in the schools, and then in the 60s through the Civil Rights Acts. But we are fully segregated. I read an article not long ago that I used to use in the law school, which said that statistically the schools are more segregated than they were when Brown versus the board was filed. We are not mixed together the way that we think we are, or that we may fool ourselves into. So the economic segregation is brutal, and it has effects on us hugely, of course. And if you're white, it's like the kind of effort I had to make, and I know this is just part of my personal story. It's not going to be the same for all of you, but urging you to explore your personal story. The kind of effort I had to make to connect to people of color was huge. It was not automatic. There was no automatic way. It was like I had to go over a whole lot of stuff personally and economically, physically, etc., put myself in places. One of the things I used to say in my race classes at PSU was, if you want to really understand Portland, get on the bus up in the West Hills, the TriMet, and stay on the bus all the way to Lloyd Center and stay on the bus past Lloyd Center. And in those days, the bus complexion would completely shift. And I would say to them, write a little journal as you're going along. What are you feeling on that bus? So for white young people, they saw their fear coming up as the bus shifted complexion in Lloyd Center, and they're headed into what was then a much more African-American area. It's now a kind of a diaspora out to Gresham and places, again, due to economics, cheaper rent, etc. So we're going to be in these classes using this model called the Ally model that we were taught, and then the three of us worked it through 20 years, and I think we really got it better. And it requires a lot of looking inside, okay? Let's see. Oh, yeah. The other piece is, as I came into Buddhism then from mid-90s on, I began to notice that the Ally model was very close to the Bodhisattva model, the Buddhist Bodhisattva model. The Ally, like the Bodhisattva, wants to be awake, and I know this can sound in some moments like I'm only doing a workshop for white people, but I have to acknowledge that I'm a white working class to upper middle class woman, and I'm going to have to speak through my identities. But this Ally model is quite helpful no matter what ism you are targeted by or you engage in, usually unawarely. Okay? So this Ally model can work both directions. whether you, another way to say it is whether you're a victim of isms, which we all are, by the way. There's no one who's not. Okay. The richest, whitest, straightest, malest person has some kind of thing that comes at him through the culture that steals his or her humanity. That's what the isms do. They just take away. Well, they attempt to take away our humanity, but we don't give it up, right? So you know, it's just like our Buddha nature can't ever be besmirched at all. It's adamantine. It's diamond-like. It's the strongest, purest. So we always have that together. Okay. Now, let's read some quotes. Let's read some quotes. I think that might be good. And which ones do I want to have us read? Let's look at the very first quote, and then this one says, read the second one. Okay, let's do the prayer at the top together, all right? Has everybody got their quotes? May all beings, including myself, abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Let's read the next paragraph together. Neither the coarse feeling of unpleasantness nor the agitated feeling of pleasure. Equanimity, the Buddha said, is one of the highest kinds of happiness, beyond compare with mere pleasant feelings. That's from an article, Equanimity in Every Bite. And let's do the next one. Equanimity is steady through vicissitudes, equally close to the things you may like and the things you do not like. Equanimity contains the complete willingness to behold the pleasant and the painful events of life equally. It points to a deep balance in which you are not pushed and pulled between the coercive energies of desire and aversion. Okay, so I want to say this about equanimity. That's powerful. It's steady through vicissitudes. That's its quality. Some people talk about the earth. The earth doesn't, if it's dry, if it's wet, if you stamp on it, if you kiss it, it's the earth. So it's like that. This is what equanimity is like. It has that quality of reliable, unshakable, even in earthquakes, comes back to earth. Okay? So looking at that story I told about the young men who murdered Mulugeta Sera, equanimity requires, and the Buddha's path requires, that we hold them all in our hearts equally. This is tough, right? This is the tough work. So the young men who did the killing with a baseball bat, the African man who was killed, there was a big trial in Portland, and some really excellent lawyers worked on it for free and convicted this guy of crossing state lines to cause crimes, you know, the one that had fomented them, and then the young men were convicted of murder. But in a Buddhist path with equanimity and loving kindness and our wisdom of the fact that all of these stories are in essence dreamlike, that's already gone. There's not 1 ounce of it here, and yet there is an effect, right? I'm here because of that happening. I did this work because of that happening. It like slapped me across the face and woke me up about the city I was in and the country I was in. So these things become transformative. They're impermanent. They move through. So-called evil can transform into many good things. We see this today, and we have to know this. Otherwise, we fall into this discouragement, despair, and anger, and then we're headed straight towards more suffering. We have to decide which thing we're going to do, add to the suffering or try and end the suffering. There's really not much middle ground. Okay. So this working with seeing these young men who got caught up in white Aryan resistance, I'll just say it's hard work, but it's really important to become equanimous towards them as humans, as people who were suffering terribly from their ignorance. And their ignorance was so potent that it led them into prison. Besides the karma of killing someone who's completely innocent. So that's the hard work of equanimity. Okay, so I think what I want us to do now is have us all do a contemplation. So it's a form of meditation. The first meditation we did was more what's called calm abiding, where you don't follow any particular thoughts. This is a contemplation. So contemplations have more of a directed way of using your mind. So in this contemplation, given all you've heard this morning, what messages are you saying to yourself right now? And be as honest as you can. Don't censor any messages. Look honestly at your emotions, the thoughts you're having, as you continue to hear about these things and approach the isms. As you contemplate, touch into your natural goodness, your Buddha nature. At the core, that can never be taken away, and it does not change. And touch into the goodness of all beings, and see if you can honestly meet with whatever rises, with acceptance and kindness and without judgment. So let's sit with this for a bit, just with your own truth, whatever it is. And relax the body. take some time to send towards yourself, towards your heart, towards the wounds in the heart from these isms, sending yourself the warm golden light of the Buddha, which is the warm golden light of wisdom and love. Just send it in there to heal whatever is going on. And then send that beautiful, loving, healing light out to everywhere in this country, in all the world, that everyone's heart will be healed from this confusion called racism, these confusions called sexism, deep confusions of class differences. How are we doing? Okay. All right. So now I want to talk about how we'll continue to proceed through the 3 classes. I'm really glad there's time in between them to digest some of this, because it's pretty intense and it will get more that way. But we can also have fun with it. Why not? We better have some humor, I would rather say. We'll keep doing just what we've been doing, weaving meditations with calm abiding, weaving meditations that are contemplations, and quotes about equanimity, and then information from my background working with these isms, okay? So it'll just keep going along like that. If you, how many people are not going to be able to be in all 3 sessions? It's fine, I just want to get a sense. Okay, so if you miss a session, please watch it on KCC Media YouTube, so that you will not miss so much, all right? And everyone ought to have a book. I didn't say I required it, and I still don't, because some of us have a big fat library already, and we kind of know we're not going to read this whole book. But if you are really interested in going further, etc., you want to have this book, Mindful of Race, by Ruth King. The subtitle is Transforming Racism from the Inside Out. It's quite potent. It's in our bookstore right through that door, so you can even buy it. Yeah.
There's one more copy that Diane will Sunday if they run out in the bookstore.
There's one more what? I'm sorry.
Diane Lucas, who runs the bookstore, has one
Okay. Okay, and Mary Woods right here has a copy also. And you wanted to donate that to someone?
Yeah, if somebody can't afford the book, I have a copy.
Just come talk to Mary, okay?
I found the print was a little small, so I went ahead and got it in the Kindle version.
So thank you. So there's a couple more copies. I don't know if there are any still in the bookstore. Some more came this week, I know. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. We won't do that right now. Okay, I'm going to say some more initial thoughts about isms, okay? It's hard. This is one of the challenges for me is I've been a professor, so I know too much. And it was really hard for me to peel through and go, no. You don't need to give all that. No, you don't need to hand out that. And then I would have you write a, 30-page paper on racism and the law at the law school. And now you know why I'm so tired. Anyway, so tired and retired from that. But there are some really important things to talk about race. So the first one is, race is a construct, okay? Now, as Buddhists, we know that. All concepts are constructs, right? But that is made up by humans, okay? And generally, we make up our constructs, our concepts, within a lot of confusion. But race is a huge confusion because the reality is that the way that we learn about it is so wrong. There is no such thing as separate races. We are now beginning to see this. Races, the way we think of racially, no such thing. We're seeing this through the genetics, You can get your genetics checked, and so many white people are very surprised to find out, that they have African heritage or all kinds of things. So that's just one example. But there are no separate races from a Buddhist point of view, because from a Buddhist point of view, concepts are confusion, right? And especially ones like this that lead to suffering, 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 suffering. Also, on a scientific point of view, more and more it's being shown, there is no thing such as race. There was I got to show you this. Oh, this is so cool. I didn't put this on the resource list, which I'm going to give you, but please add it in your notes. This copy of the National Geographic from April of this 2018 is fantastic. The whole issue is about race. And on the cover are two young women, one who appears white and one who appears African American, and they're twins. They have an African American father and a white mother. But that's the very smallest part of this. They have a color wheel of humanity in Pantones, showing all the colors we are, totally aside from what race we might say or what country we're from. Absolutely amazing. I showed this to my grandson last night because he's 6, and he came up to me a couple weeks ago and he said, I said, do you have friends at your new school? And he said, yeah, I have this friend. And he said his name. I don't know the child's name. And he said, he's brown. You need to know my grandson's white, and so-called. And he said he's brown, but he speaks English really good. And I thought, already, and there's been, so I showed him this last night, this Pantones of all. I said, look, you were telling me about your friend, and look all the colors people are, and they speak all kinds of languages, English and all kinds of languages. And then we put our arms down. He put his arm down, like, who did he match? And, it was just kind of a sweet moment. But it starts early, that kind of, he's brown, but You know, there's a but in there. And there's a study of children from around age 3. This was a study done back in the 80s, where they would show them a black doll and a white doll dressed identically, show them in an identical way. And even the children of color would pick the white doll. And then they would have a conversation of why. Why did you pick that doll? Oh, she's nicer, she's this, she's that, you know. So as Camilo just said, it starts early. And that's important that we know. So it's a construct and a concept, yet it's a powerful one. When we start looking at the isms, we deal with these really powerful delusions because we're immersed in it. The country's immersed in it, our culture's immersed in it, and yet it denies that it is. So as I did legal work around race issues, really as a law student from the mid-70s up till I quit in the late 80s, I quit law and went into mediation to save my sanity. As I did this, the Supreme Court went from a more sane kind of standard, which was a standard that said there has been a racial wrong. When they put in affirmative action in the Civil Rights Act, there has been racial wrong historically, and we need to have remedies. So they began to fashion remedies. That lasted from about 54 if you look at Brown versus the Board, which desegregated the schools, legally desegregated, but they never actually desegregated. There was such resistance and white flight and all kinds of things. So, but at that time, when I was a young law student, it was exciting because there was this court that said, we need remedies. So we filed all kinds of things, including sex discrimination against prostitutes, because we said only women get arrested and they weren't arresting the men. And that helped change some policies in the police department where they put women police out there acting as prostitutes to arrest the men. Anyway, lots of things like that. But the court was kind of headed in what we might say at least a good direction of providing remedies. But that only went from about really engaged from 64 when the Civil Rights Act was passed up till about 74. And then the presidents, one by one, started backing off from it, as did the Congress. So affirmative action became a wrong way to go about things, a problem. And so the courts started backing away from that to the point where reverse racism cases were filed by usually white men, saying, I'm the one being targeted by racism because of affirmative action. This black student got in and I didn't, or this, so you get the picture. This black person got the job because of affirmative action plans. Affirmative action never, ever, ever touted hiring unqualified people, but that was another myth that was put in. What it said is if you have two equally qualified people, in order to remedy the past wrongs, you hire from the group that's been wronged. That was it. So the myth became, a bunch of unqualified people of color got hired and these poor white people got left out. And then reverse racism cases started being filed. And the court eventually came to what it's using now, which it even named it a colorblind theory. We have erased racism. It's not there. And I don't know when we did that, but it happened magically. Waved the wand, no more racism. And therefore, we approach all cases with the colorblind standard. Everybody stands before us as an equal individual. So you can see the individualism wipes out the whole group. It wipes out the history of groups. And white people are no longer responsible for anything but going forward. So that's just a thumbnail sketch of what happened with the law and how it's still going. So I'm going to say one more thing about isms. Every ism that you can think of has a power aspect to it. That's what's the difficult part. So people can mix it up with prejudice, okay? I'm not prejudiced. I see the world as everybody kind of equal individuals. I treat everybody, I really do this. I try to treat everybody the same. And that person's prejudiced. And that's the problem. We got to fix that person. But every ism has this power aspect. So the way I've always taught this in a thumbnail sketch is, if I don't like children with blue eyes, it doesn't matter much. You know, I mean, if they're my grandkids or something, I'm going to have to do something. But it doesn't really matter in the sense of I don't have the power to pass a law like people with blue eyes should live in that neighborhood. We'll give them housing loans over there. We won't hire them because, you know, blue eyes, they're kind of not quite trustworthy. I don't have the power to make that happen. But if I'm a teacher in a public school classroom and I don't like kids with blue eyes, now I have power. The power to call on, the power to not call on, the power to grade, the power to affect them. So that's the power piece. So whenever we're looking, it's always the particular ism plus power. Not personal power, I'm talking economic, social, legal power. And it's so important to know that so we don't get caught in these prejudice, not prejudice kind of discussions, which are just barely touching the surface. And we'll look at that more later. Okay, I'm going to open for questions in a minute, but I want us to look together at Ruth's book. I'm relying on Ruth so much. I have been saying, okay, I'll do this thing, but, you know, come with me. And I feel like she is. Who does not have a book with you? So you three, can we, you guys can share. You've got close enough. Find someone close enough. Can you pass the book over to these three, to the middle, and then share with Dora? Or, yeah. So everybody, Mary, you want to bring it over here to Laura? Over here. That's the corner without. So let's look at pages 105, 106. And what I'd like us to do, starting right at the top, 105, 106. Okay. Let's do a go round and read out loud. Just read a part and then pass it on to the next person, starting right with the title. And if you don't like to read out loud, like me, you can just pass. So who likes to read out loud and would like to? And we'll put it with the mic. Who's got the mic? Okay, Linda will run the mic. Who would start us out? Okay, Andrea, thank you.
Understanding the cycle of misperception.
You have to put the mic very close to you.
Very close, okay. Change the story and you change perception. Change perception and you change the world. Jean Houston. Falling might very well be flying without the tyranny of coordinates.
That's good.
I can't say the name. Bio. The racial ignorance and distress we see in the world today is a reflection of the mind playing itself out in grand scale on the big screen, projecting our collective conscious and unconscious conditioning. Every one of our lives represents a mosaic with many shades, shadows, and shapes of experiences. In our relational world of vast diversity, kinship, and division, we have all been racially conditioned, trained through many generations in how to perceive race, our own and that of others. For example, when we look at people, we often reduce them to a concept or a summation of their group identity by saying or thinking superficially, he's a gay guy, or she's an Asian woman, or they are black or white. So much is driven by the perceptions we have and by how these perceptions then feed certain thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. However, we were not meant to be simple summations or to be seen with casual eyes. We must be willing to look closer to see what else is there, to see beyond the glossy print of fixed perceptions to the nuances, the subtle gradation, the treasure in the understated, even the forbidden. This discernment begins within our own minds and hearts. We can become more mindful of our perceptions and use them as invitations to look more deeply at our racial habits of mind.
Okay. Who would like to? And we're just going to go through about the first 5 sentences of the next paragraph. Nice and loud into the mic, because what it's for is those who are listening on streaming. Okay. So you have to get it close to your mouth.
Buddhist teachings refer to misperceptions as perceptual knots, ways of viewing the block freedom and keep us entangled in knotty thoughts. These misperceptions include our attachments, aversions, distortions, and delusions. They keep us thinking that life is personal and permanent and that it should be perfect.
Okay, let's stop there. Thank you. Good. Okay. Now.
Should we be taking a break?
Yeah, that's a good idea. How about we take a break till 10:30? There's 2 restrooms here, there's 2 restrooms downstairs, and there's tea downstairs, which you can bring back up here. So let's do that. Thank you, Bill, for reminding.